So my name is Dick Taylor, and I'm here today representing Congressman Kevin McCarthy, and I'm interviewing today Marvin Belcher, and it is Thursday, August 3rd, 2017, and we're here at Bakersfield College in Bakersfield, California. And operating the camera is John Farrand, and this interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project as part of the Library of Congress. So with that, we'll get started.
Good.
Thanks for being with us today. And so what I'd like to do is, I wanted to ask you a little bit about where you grew up. When you were born, where you grew up as a young man.
I was born September 3rd, 1925, out in the country, about 9 miles northeast of Shawnee, Oklahoma. The address was in Earlsboro rural route. And we lived there on a sharecropper farm all of the time that we lived in Oklahoma. We came to California in 1941 between my sophomore and junior years in high school.
Okay, and at that point, you guys came to Modesto.
Yes.
Your family moved to Modesto,
Yes.
and then that's kind of where you spent most of your school life?
Well, yes, I finished high school there, and then we came to Modesto in 1941, June, and that fall, Pearl Harbor. And from that time on, it was just a matter of what could I do to get in the service. As I approached graduation in 1943, I was taking several examinations for the V-12 program. That's a Navy program. I wanted to be a pilot, so I tried to get in the Army Air Corps. My nose was too crooked for that, so they flunked me. Tried to get in the Navy Air Corps, and I had too much of an overbite. So they said no thanks. And then the draft came along, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me, so I passed with flying colors and again applied to be a cadet, a pilot, and passed everything. And from that standpoint, I took my training, my basic at Buckley Field, Colorado, outside Denver. Then went to Menterfield outside of Bakersfield, California, for my on-the-line training, waiting for an assignment to the college phase of the training. And while there, someone wrote a letter indicating that they needed gunners more than they needed pilots. So since I was drafted rather than enlisted, volunteered,
right.
I was among those 36,000 that were transferred from the cadet program to flexible gunnery school. There were other options, but that's what I chose.
Sure.
So I became a gunner instead of a pilot, and then went on to, in that training, became a ball turret gunner on a B-17.
And then where was that training?
That training, ball turret training, was in Avon Park, Florida. My flexible gunnery school was outside of Kingman, Arizona. We picked up our crew at Avon Park and had training as a crew, Avon Park, Florida, and that was a good experience, although it was, I was reading through my my diary last night, and I had noted that was not a very exciting time, except meeting my crew and the people that I would ultimately be flying with. So it was a time to get acquainted and to polish off what I would do as a crew member.
Sure. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, so did you have other members of your family that served
Yes.
in the military?
Yes. My twin brother, he passed the exam for the V-12 program and was in the Navy, and finally did not complete that program, but he became a radio operator on a ship, Oklahoma City cruiser. And my younger brother then, Roy, joined the Navy. My another brother, Thurman Belcher, was in the Army. He was a football player and spent most of his time in special services, which was kind of an easy ride as far as I was concerned.
Right.
But he did not. This was after the war, so it was kind of easy time.
Sure.
His twin. There were 3 sets of twin boys in our family. Thurman's twin, Herman, became a conscientious objector. That was sort of the encouragement of our church, Peace Church, Church of the Brethren. And that obviously was one of the things that sort of weighed in my mind. But I was so eager to get in that I didn't pay too much attention to that, as I have more recently after the service time.
Sure.
Anyway, we have some. I discovered in my diary last night that I have a letter that I have not read since that time from my twin brother, and I found other things there. In fact, I found a letter when 36,000 of us were eliminated from the cadet program, a letter of considerable apology for this because it was a disruption of what we had hoped to be involved with. But it was well written, and I appreciated
Wow, and this
reading
was
it
from
last
somebody-
night.
And this was from somebody within the
Yes, within the
Army? Wow.
The Army, yes.
And so then, what did were your parents a part of the picture as you were going to the service?
Yes, when I caught the bus there at Modesto to go to Sacramento to be inducted into the Army, my father, who didn't give a lot of advice, he was a hardworking, wonderful person, but it was mostly work on the farm, and we knew what our job was, and we were to do it. Very well disciplined. Both my mother and father I have great appreciation for. They were great people. Anyway, his advice as I got on the bus to go into the Army, he says, "Be the best soldier in the Army." And that impressed me because, as I say, he wasn't prone to giving much advice. But I honored that and kept that in mind through the years.
Wow.
Still appreciate it.
Wow. And were
In fact, my grandson, who lives with us, had joined the California National Guard, and I gave him the same advice. Be the best soldier in the Army.
Nice. And any of your other family members besides your brothers, were there any uncles or grandparents or anything like that?
Yes. My favorite cousin, Robert Bob Brumbelow, our age, graduated the same year we did from high school, joined the Marines, and did not come back. In fact, at that time, a lot of my friends, the friend who lived across the fence from us in Oklahoma, my very best friend with whom I played baseball, and we were in church together and just visited all the time together, good friends, did not come back. My cousin, as I indicated, did not come back. There were a lot of people who did not make it back. And I felt very blessed to not only serve in an exciting manner as a crew member of B-17, and to make it back with a lot of flack at the end of the war. They were really deadly on their putting up the anti-aircraft fire.
So when you left Florida after your school to be a ball turret belly gunner,
Yes.
So then you were assigned to a unit over in Europe.
Yes.
To aboard a B-17 with the 8th Air Force.
Yes, 384th Bomb Group, 544th Bomb Squadron, and we had great men, a great group of service persons there. 26 missions. Many times, many holes were in the plane as we arrived home due to the flak. But in 26 missions, there was not a member of our crew that got a scratch.
Wow.
So we felt very fortunate. At that time, because of the strategic bombing, we did not encounter enemy aircraft fighter planes, but the anti-aircraft fire was really well developed, and they
Those
filled
are the German 88s, and yeah.
well, they filled the sky with popping anti-aircraft
Right.
rounds, and so we felt very fortunate. I've seen planes go off our wing, on their way down. And, some of my best friends there in the service did not make it back, but we were fortunate, our crew.
Were any of those, did most of those, if they got hit, did they ultimately end up crashing and dying, or did any of them bail out and get captured or escape?
Well, there were many who bailed out and were captured and returned finally to the base. We had the slogan for our group, "Keep the show on the road," and that was from someone who had bailed out and was in a what do we call it anyway, a prisoner of war camp, and he got the message back to our base, our camp, says, "Keep the show on the road," and that became our motto.
Wow. Wow. And so the targets, of course, as a belly gunner, would they tell you what the targets were?
Oh yes. The entire crew was in on the briefing early morning before we took off, and so we knew what the target was, what the anticipated, well, everything about the trip, cloud coverage, anticipated anti-aircraft fire, what the target was, and so we were well informed.
So then also two things. So this ball turret that you were in isn't exactly spacious.
No.
And you're not exactly a teeny man. So you had hours and hours of flying.
Yes, there were times when we had virtually 10 hours in that ball turret.
Wow.
That would be my situation. I was 139 pounds then, much smaller, so I fit into the ball really well. In fact, I had enough space that, that's a safe place to be as long as there's no problem. But if you had to get out fast, you might not be able to get out fast, especially if the system failed. So I was ready to push the
like the
hatch open and bail out backwards out from my ball. So I had my
directly into the sky?
Yeah, I had my parachute on one side here attached, and I figure if worst came to worst, I would get out.
Wow.
And locate the other end of the parachute where it was supposed to be, and
right.
I was on my way.
And to that end, talking about the tight conditions, and if some of these other air crew got hit, sometimes the belly gunner would have a difficult time getting out of that turret, either into the plane to then get out or to get out of the turret. If somehow the mechanism got damaged.
That's right.
And then they just went down with the plane.
Yeah.
And so what would you think about when you were flying? I mean, what would you do to occupy? 10 hours. Geez, some of us have a hard time keeping track of 2 or 3 hours in a plane.
Yeah.
What would you do for 10 hours?
Well, most of the flights were not that long. We would, as we were stationed in England, as we crossed the English Channel, we knew there would, even before we crossed the Channel, we knew it was time to get in, because there might be a fighter plane that was up, and we needed to be ready. But most of the flights were like 6 to 7, 8 hours, and
those are still long flights.
Yeah, still long. And then so I might be in the ball turret, 4 to 6 hours, 4 to 5 hours. So it's just not 10 hours.
So what would you do for if you needed to eat or got thirsty?
I had my what do you call that, the canteen with me, and if there were physical needs, you'd just take care of it best you could.
Okay. And, okay, so then, so you'd go over there, there'd be just horrendous amounts of anti-aircraft fire, flak. And for those that don't know, flak is like a huge shotgun shell that explodes with shrapnel and it can damage the aircraft and kill
Yes.
people.
I was reading last night in my diary, well, actually, let me digress just a little bit and bring me back then. The only remaining member of our crew that's still alive, besides myself, was the waist gunner, as far as we know. We've lost track of everyone else. We think we know many of them have died. His daughter sent me a very nice booklet on the history of our operation there. And he had indicated from his information that one of the flights was we were flying that plane, it was new, we were flying it for the first time, first flight. And we got back and they counted 100 holes due to the flak, just to illustrate how intense it could be. And even though it was not huge gaping holes, there were 100 holes altogether. And I have thought, from time to time, how fortunate we were that none of our crew received any injury whatsoever.
And did your aircraft have a name?
We flew in various airplanes, and all of the planes had a name.
Right.
But it was different planes and different names.
And then were there some that you remember? Any of the names of the aircraft that you remember, and that they had named the aircraft? Any of those stick in your mind or anything?
Not really.
Okay.
The usual names that you hear were very common.
Right. So your position in that turret, if I'm not mistaken, you had two 50 caliber machine guns?
Yes. Yeah, outside my legs, 250 calibers. The controls were right here.
So
Both the controls for the plane and also the trigger.
And so how did they get fed? Were there belts of ammunition that
Yes,
came in?
yes. Coming out of a little canister here on both sides.
And was there ever a point where, maybe not so much with you guys, but was there ever a point where you could maybe run out of ammunition?
It could be. Of course, we didn't, because we didn't encounter that kind of anti-aircraft, enemy aircraft.
Right.
But yes, there could be that situation very definitely.
And then sometimes in
We were probably more prone for that kind of situation in the ball because we would have a limited supply.
right.
And a waist gunner might have a big supply. In fact, we might have got additional ammunition if not likely we would come out of the ball, but conceivably we could have. We never encountered that problem of running out of ammunition.
Right. And there were, of course, you had you were looking at everybody, and you had this turret that was made out of plexiglass or glass.
A lot of plexiglass, yes.
Okay.
I saw a lot of ground underneath.
Right.
We could turn that thing all the way around and 90 degrees right straight down.
So you could control that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then sometimes in talking to fellow veterans, particularly those that served when you did in World War II, were there any particular smells or sounds that kind of take you back there again? That kind of jog your memory when you smell something or hear something, it reminds you of that time?
Not particularly, although I will say that when we were in training in the ball turret, my first training experience at Kingman, Arizona, and that temperature and the terrain was such that it was rough going. We were, some of the guys who were in that ball on previous trips threw up, heaved, vomited right there in the ball, and that odor persisted no matter how we tried to clean it. There was no 100% cleaning.
Right.
And so that smell in the hot temperature of Kingman, Arizona, and thereabouts, was not pleasant. It almost made you vomit just to
Sure.
be aware of it.
When you came back from these missions, because you were on 26 missions over Germany,
Yeah.
when you came back to your base in England, what would you do? I mean, would you go get food? Did you go?
The first stop was to bring us from the plane to the briefing room, to the post mission room, where we were asked questions about what happened. We always had a shot of whiskey, just to kind of settle our nerves, I guess. I never imbibed. I never had much of a drinking problem. Never had a problem with it, but I always appreciated that shot for some reason. And we shared then with the intelligence officer what had happened, what we observed, and so forth. So, debriefing.
Sure, like maybe where the flak was the heaviest or things like that. And so then, did you ever? Of course, the B-17's got 4 engines.
4 engines. Let me interject here. The B-17 is a great flying machine and very durable, and it was capable of coming back with a lot of damage. And there's a lot of indication of that, and was so I was very pleased to have been with the B-17 group. Now, for instance, a B-24, another good bomber in our time, had enough, as I understand it, enough hydraulic systems that they were prone to be damaged, and were not nearly as our bias anyway, not nearly as durable as the B-17. So I was very pleased with the B-17 for that era.
Right. And so after you came back and you got debriefed, you had a shot of whiskey, maybe get a little bit of chow, and then what were the accommodations like where you slept?
Well, we slept in a tent. This was in England, always cold there. We were there from February actually to May until VE Day, but nearly always cold and snow on the ground much of the time. So we'd go back and light up the cold stove and be in our tent most of the day then. Out on the base, there was not much to do. There were times when we were flying every day, and then there were other times when there'd be some gap because of weather or other conditions. But since we got up early, it might have been 3 o'clock in the morning, we were ready for a nap when we got back. So eat, sleep, and fly, that was about it.
And then you got to take a shower?
Yes, I'm sure we had showers, but I don't frankly remember what those conditions were.
Right. How about, was there a way to find out about kind of the news on the outside world, what was going on? And did you get mail from home?
Got mail. There was a little army paper also that kept us apprised of what's happening out there. But we got a lot of official briefing too of what we were doing and the effectiveness of our work. And we didn't hear much about what's going on back home. I did get letters, always happy for them. My church, I will say that for me, I knew that the pastor was always praying each Sunday for the service persons because that was what he did when I was there before I went to the service. And so I took a lot of, that was reassuring to me, and I knew my parents were praying, and I did a lot of praying too. When I knew that I was going to be a lot of people shooting at me. Anyway, we were very grateful for the prayers. We knew that was happening, people across the country, in fact, not just in our hometown.
Sure.
So that was reassuring certainly to me, and I think to all of us who were there.
And did they ever have some kind of service
Yes.
at the base?
Yes. In fact, the chapel was available, and the base chapel was available every morning before the mission.
So
We could go in for a prayer before the mission.
And did you ever kind of and I don't know if you remember this or not, did you ever start thinking, like you start doing the math in your head, thinking, okay, I know these guys over here, they were on their 10th mission or their 15th mission, and you just kind of didn't think about that stuff?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So
We came back to our tent, and we lived as a crew member, crew
Right.
team.
Right.
And we didn't know too much about who was in the next tent, or we didn't know other crew members personally,
Right.
except a few.
And did you, what was the name of the base in England that you flew out of?
Grafton Underwood.
Okay. And then were you allowed to go out into town ever?
Oh yes. Grafton Underwood was a little village town. A little church there. We have a memorial picture of our B-17 in the memorial window of this little church, which we have maintained through the years.
Oh, it's still there?
Yeah, oh yes. And Northampton was the next larger town. Now let's see, there was another smaller town. Let's see, Grafton Underwood. I can't cough up the next little town. It was a little bit larger, but when we went on leave, it was Northampton. And that was about an hour's drive from London. We were
Would
north.
you ride a bus or a car or a taxi or?
As I recall, it was a bus. No, not a taxi.
And then, was there things you did besides going out into town that you did for recreation?
Not much recreation there. There was a bowling alley, and I enjoyed the bowling.
Nice.
That's about it.
Nice. So at this point we're kind of nearing you're on your 26th mission, and you kind of look forward to that, and you're getting to a point where you're at some point in your not too distant future, you're looking at having the war be done with.
Absolutely.
And Germany surrendered.
Yes.
And then what happened after Germany surrendered?
Almost immediately, we started using the B-17 with some conversion to use it as a flying troops home from Bordeaux, France to down in Africa near Casablanca, where they would catch a ship home, troop ship. And so I became a male steward
Oh, right.
for the troops. A couple of trips on that, and then I somehow or other got the idea that since the war was still going on in the Pacific, with my skills already developed, I should go help in the Pacific zone area. So I was headed for the Pacific, and got this furlough en route. And while I was home, the hydrogen bomb, or whatever it was, the atomic bomb, was dropped to 2 of them on Japan. And then we had VJ Day. That was in August, I guess. VE Day, Victory in Europe, was in May of 1945. Victory in Japan was just a few months later. I think it was August of 45. And so at that point, we were just on a waiting list. How can we spend the time most comfortably and still be of some help?
Sure.
So I became basically a desk person, clerical work, until my discharge, honorable discharge, November 1st, 1945. I was fortunate because of the flying over the various areas. I got credit for participation in the various wars underneath us, So I had enough points to get an early discharge.
Nice.
And from then, it was getting an education and getting on with my life.
So along that line, so how did you find the readjustment to civilian life when you got out?
Readjust?
Mhm.
Well, of course, I came home to Empire, which is the little town outside Modesto where my folks lived. Incidentally, my dad, during the war, went to Richmond as a help in the shipbuilding, Kaiser.
Up in the Bay Area?
Yeah, in the Bay Area, Richmond. He was home, and so I entered Modesto Junior College a year, and then I was considering becoming a minister and decided to go to Laverne, which was the church for our denomination, Laverne College at that time, now University of Laverne. And while there, I decided, well, probably not the ministry, but I'd be prepared to be a teacher. And had enough units from the educational benefits that were allowed to us to take an additional year at Claremont Graduate School, and then came to Bakersfield along with some other friends of ours from Bakersfield and McFarland area. Kind of like, if you'll go to Bakersfield, we'll go to Bakersfield. And we thought maybe a couple of years and then someplace more livable. But we have enjoyed living in Bakersfield. School district, the town, the people, definite Midwest flavor in terms of the people. So we've been very pleased in Bakersfield.
And so you taught for a lot of years.
I taught 2 years, a counselor 1 year, and then became a principal. I was in the timing of the. They were giving competitive exams. I've always been a good exam taker and scored well, and became a principal for my the year, 1 year after the earthquake in 1952. Longfellow School.
Sure.
7 years, 13 years at principal at Emerson, and 3 years at Colonel Nichols School, and then went to the district office as director of employee relations and administrative services. I was a negotiator for the district, working with employee unions,
Right.
and then seeing that we followed the contract that we had agreed to.
So Longfellow, Emerson, Colonel Nichols, and then back to the district. Wow.
Yeah, district office.
Wow. And
35 years.
Wow. So you put a lot of years in the education system with Bakersfield City School District.
Yes.
And then, go ahead.
Well,
so if were there your wartime experiences, how did you think your wartime experience, two things, how do you think your wartime experiences affected your life, and life lessons that you learned as a result of your service in the Army Air Corps?
well, first of all, my service in the Army Air Corps, and the educational benefits that accrued following the war took me off the ladder as a fruit picker and put me in the classroom. And then the rest is history, so to speak. That was a life changer for me. I don't know exactly how I would answer the second question. It was adventuresome, to say the least, but I was glad to get on with my college and my career goals, and it was almost like never looking back. I wanted to live a life of service. What could I do in the most effective way to help the most people And as I say, I considered the ministry for a while, but then I decided that actually the education was my calling. And I have felt good about what I did in education. I was active in the community all along the way. In Kiwanis, I had 50 years of perfect attendance in Kiwanis. I gave up on the doctoral program, didn't write the dissertation because I knew that my time was growing short with my kids, and so I did not do the dissertation. That's my excuse anyway. I had a lot of truth there. Became a scoutmaster, became a junior baseball coach, and was very active in the church, Sunday school teacher, deacon. It's been a life that's been very satisfying. Had a good fortune of marrying a wonderful wife, wonderful lady. Virginia, she's been a very good strength for me, good for me. Vegetarian. My mother grew up in Alabama, so we had Southern food that I was used to, and it was a common adjustment, but it was a good adjustment to have that influence of good nutrition. So, good nutrition, good health habits, good activity. Here I am looking at 92 next month, and still just took to my cane this week. So I'm very fortunate, very blessed.
Anything else? This has been a phenomenal interview, Marvin. Anything else you want to add that you want to make sure we get recorded?
I've been very active with the what's the name of the group? Honor Flight, and I almost didn't go because I thought I don't need that. That was so long ago I've forgotten about everything about it. But I was talked into going, and it was a memorable experience. I didn't realize emotionally how I would be affected by the honor flight. And I am now a strong supporter of that because I think, however you'd want to phrase it, whether it's a psychological need or what, I didn't think I needed it, but in retrospect, I think I did need it. So I strongly support the honor flight of veterans going back to visit the memorials in Washington, D.C. And the whole experience of everyone trying to make you feel like you were a hero. Well, we didn't ever feel like we were heroes. We just were doing what everyone else was doing. But it was an experience that I had not expected, but I was pleased to have experienced it.
Nice. Okay, well, Marvin, I wanted to thank you on behalf of all of us here. I want to thank you for your military service. I want to thank you for your continued service in our community when you return. The inspiration you provide to those of us also that followed as veterans in our military service, and we're grateful for the honor that you bring to our community. I want to thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. All righty. I think that, as they say, Marvin, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Good.
Yeah.
That was a very good interview, Mr. Belcher.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Yes.
Great job.
I knew you would.
Yep. Yeah, that's old hat. 'Cause we were on, it was just about a year ago, we were on radio together.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
It goes without saying, but you know, we often don't express what we ought to express. I appreciate your work and your service and the way you relate so easily to people, myself included. I just really appreciate that.
Thanks.
And that's another way of saying I like you.
Yeah, that's not easy, I know. Ask my wife. No, I appreciate that, Marvin. It means a lot.